So, me, Natalia, Wright, and Hugo Hernandez have decided to do our anatomy project on Huntington's disease. A quick description of Huntington's is it's a disease that affects the nerve cells in the brain and causes a loss of cognitive function as the disease progresses.
What does Huntington's do to your brain? Huntington's makes you lose a lot of nerve cells, which occurs in the structure of the brain called the basal ganglia. It mainly affects the striatum. It also decreases the volume of the cerebral cortex, causing your memories, emotion, and thought to be affected. New and old knowledge tells us that HD isn't just a striatal problem, it's a multi-system disorder that affects the whole brain and body. On to the next slide. Some symptoms of Huntington's disease include abnormal eye movement, difficulty swallowing or speaking, and impaired walking patterns. Some cognitive disorders could be sporadic behavior, difficulty retaining information, and difficulty focusing. On to the next slide. Some psychiatric disorders are feeling of irritability, sadness, or apathy, social withdrawal, and fatigue, and loss of energy. Other common psychiatric disorders include obsessive compulsive disorder, mania, bipolar disorder. Yeah. On to the next slide.
So this image is just kind of what it does to your brain. It sort of enlarges the ventricles and sort of deteriorates parts of the brain. So for the progression, it can be divided into 5 stages of advancements. The stage 1 is early stages. There's little to no motor symptoms of that are changing, and there's like mild cognitive and psychiatric symptoms. You can basically go through all of your daily activities on your own. And then there's stage 2, where you can still maintain independence doing your daily tasks, but occasionally there are some tasks that you'll need a little bit of assistance on. And then there's stage 3, and this is where things start to kick up. Your ability to think becomes impaired, and cognitive, physical, and motor skills worsen, and you start to need more assistance. Stage 4, you require full assistance for daily activities, but you can still remain at home and still do them, but you will need a lot of assistance. And then stage 5, the final stage, you need total support. Your chorea lessens and your Parkinson's sort of increases. All the symptoms worsen, and you usually pass away between 15 to 20 years after these symptoms appear, and the cause of your death is usually a sort of form of complication of Huntington's, like heart failure or infection or pneumonia. There's a couple of theories of how it progresses. One of the main theories is that the disease spreads to areas in the brain using anatomical connections. If the cells contained in the striatum begin to die, they can't pass messages to other cells in the thalamus or the cerebral cortex. This eventually leads to the cells becoming sick themselves when they stop receiving messages from the striatum. Imaging studies have also shown that while the striatum decays quickly, the other areas of the brain, such as the cortex, thalamus, brainstem, and cerebellum, tend to decay at a slower rate, which may explain why the symptoms in those areas tend to progress later down the line as you have Huntington's. Some facts is that the disease is considered to be autosomal dominant / progressive, meaning that it doesn't matter what gender you have. It can affect anyone. It's a neurodegenerative disease. It usually occurs in a person's 30s to 40s, but it can affect all ages. People of European ancestry have the most common, and people of African and Asian, there's like rarely any reports of them receiving it. And here's just a little chart of how these impairments and things progress. And then some history is that it was first recognized. It was discovered previously, but it was first recognized in 1872 by an American doctor, George Huntington, hence the name. His paper was later published in the Medical and Surgical Reports of Philadelphia, and the disorder he described became known as Huntington's chorea. It was originally thought for people to have it, they originally thought that they were possessed by devils or witches. And there are no current cures for this disease, but there are treatments and therapies to sort of lessen it, and there are also many support groups. And then here are the genetics of them.
Alright, so the genetics. The HTT mutation that causes Huntington's disease involves a DNA segment known as the CAG trinucleotide repeat. This segment is made up of a series of 3 DNA building blocks, cytosine, adenine, and guanine, that appear multiple times in a row. Normally, the CAG segment is repeated 10 to 35 times within the gene. In people with Huntington's disease, the CAG segment is repeated 36 to more than 120 times. People with 36 to 39 CAG repeats may or may not develop the signs and symptoms of Huntington's disease, while people with 40 or more repeats almost always develop the disorder. On to the next slide.
Yeah, this is a picture of a family tree. This disease is inherited, so the squares represent infected or males, while the circles represent females. The ones that are darkened have been affected, and the ones that are white have been unaffected. So as you can see, there's like about a 50 to 75% chance of the person's offspring receiving the disease. And then next slide. And then here is a video.
It was in the 1980s when Marie Clay first noticed her husband showing some unusual behaviors, like memory lapses and moments of rage.
Finally, he did go to a doctor, and they did some tests on him, and they found out he had Huntington's disease. So he didn't know anything about it. He just knew it was a brain disorder.
What? And then, oh, I hope I was getting that.
About 4 years after Phil Clay was diagnosed, the Clay's oldest daughter, Lori, started showing the same signs of the genetic disease: clumsiness, memory loss, and speech problems.
The doctor came in and just matter-of-factly said, "You're positive." I mean, it was like pretty much like a death sentence, really, because we knew what was going on with their dad. And so it was very, very emotional.
Children of people with Huntington's disease, which is incurable, have a 50-50 chance of inheriting the same faulty gene. Lori's son Michael is 12 years old. He is yet to be tested.
My aunt hasn't gotten tested yet, and it's a very hard decision, because if you get tested and you're positive, you know that you're gonna have it.
Lori Clay tested positive 11 years ago. She's now 39. The disease makes it hard for her to sit still in a chair and formulate her thoughts about the disease, but she agreed to try. She wants people to know how hard the disease has made it to be the mother she wants to be to her son, or to do the normal, everyday things that most people take for granted.
And, not be able to drive. I haven't driven in like 8 years. Doing those sorts of things, running errands or running, Michael brings me mostly the appointments and grocery store, all the errands. So, we have to do all those things, and I'm blessed though. It's horrible, but I am blessed. Just not be able to do so many things like other people with their moms. It's just always been hard.
It's a monster. It's a culmination of many diseases put together. I mean, it's like no other disease that mankind has ever seen, and it's a shame that so little people know about it.
What? And then, I hope I would.
Okay, so that was our presentation. This is just the works cited page, and yeah, I think we're done.